Welcome to the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council with hosts Grace Evans and Moses Brattrud. Stay informed on the top stories on life, family, and religious freedom. Get the facts, stand for truth. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Family Beacon podcast. I'm Grace Evans. I'm here with Moses Brattrud. Actually, just teasing.
I shaved my beard. I look so different without a beard.
Yeah. As you can tell, we actually have a little bit different setup going on this week. Our co-host, Moses, is out of the office. He, unfortunately, is sick.
Well, we thought the COVID fairy maybe had visited him, but he's negative.
Yep, he's negative.
Yeah.
But he's staying home, just resting up. So I am joined today by my dad, actually, Jeff Evans, who is the director of the Church Ambassador Network. And we're really excited about this episode. It's going to be a little bit different than what we normally do. Normally we cover news, about 2 to 3 stories a week, and you can tune in next week. We'll probably be doing back to our regular rhythm and pattern. But this week, really exciting episode coming at you in lieu of Moses. So today I'm going to be interviewing my dad about the Church Ambassador Network, which is one of our main initiatives here at Minnesota Family Council. So why don't we just go ahead and kick it off? CAN, like I said, is an initiative of MFC, CAN, or the Church Ambassador Network. So, Dad, why don't you just tell us a little bit about what the Church Ambassador Network is all about?
Oh, sure, I'd love to get that. But yeah very interesting person to interview.
I know, yeah.
Here's a 20-year-old who still likes talking to her dad, so that's fun. To have it on camera here for you guys today. Hopefully you enjoy the banter back and forth. Yeah, so Church Ambassador Network was started about 3 years ago. It's a new initiative, Minnesota Family Council, and it's really nonpartisan. We bring pastors to interact with, right now, legislators, but that will expand beyond just the legislature here in Minnesota. But we bring pastors to connect with ministers in government. So ministers in the church, we're used to that kind of language, and we don't oftentimes think nowadays about the ministry of elected office or those who are ministering in public office. But Romans 13 talks about those who are in positions of authority in governance. They're God's ministers. And so we have ministers in the church and ministers in the government. Since they're God's ministers in different institutions, what happens when we bring them together in a way where we're not bickering politically, but we're trying to minister to one another? So that's the basics of it. It goes much, much deeper than that, but just at a high level, that's what we are up to, and it's been pretty surprising as we've gone along.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that bird's eye view of the Church Ambassador Network. I think that's really important for our listeners. Throughout this episode, if you're interested in the Church Ambassador Network, as we unpack it a little more, get more into the details, you can go onto our website, mfc.org, and you can click churches at the top bar and just go there, and that's the home of the Church Ambassador Network. You can learn a lot more on the website, but I just wanted to throw that out there for you guys here at the beginning of the episode. That being said, I would love for you to tell our audience just a little bit about how you got into this, the whole story behind that. I know there's so much that went into that. When you got into this, I feel like it kind of roped me into MFC a little bit, but why don't we start back at the beginning? What would you say it was, 2011?
Yeah, late 2011, early 2012, became aware of Minnesota Family Council, became engaged as a local church pastor, just concerned about things going on in our state. I'm very concerned about the way in which groups that operate in the public square engage the church. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes the church is treated like a voting bloc or special interest group or what have you, and I didn't have any interest to have the church pawed at by various special interests. I wanted to see the church treated like the bride of Christ. She's to be treated with respect and care. As I like to joke around with pastors, if you treat the bride of Christ poorly, Jesus tends to not like that. And so we want to treat her with honor, dignity, and care. And that really resonated with Minnesota Family Council. Mm-hmm. And so I was assisting in a very part-time capacity, still a lead pastor of a church for a number of years. But all along, I wanted to do something that was different than... and I'm not downplaying these things, but I want to do something different than engaging elected officials like everybody else can. Like there's a place for lobbying, for engagement.
And we're all for that here at MFC. That's part of what we do. But
it's healthy when you even have disagreements on the lobbying front, because oftentimes you can get more to the root of what the truth of something is. So even lobbyists who might disagree with Minnesota Family Council, there's a place for that. There's a healthy dynamic that can happen. Mm-hmm. And so not downplaying that at all, but I wanted to do something different. And so I started thinking scripturally, what's available to us, especially as pastors, in engaging in this moment in time, which is pretty tumultuous, and there's a lot of rancor and frustration, sometimes legitimate, sometimes self-inflicted. And one of the things kept coming back to is this command in 1 Timothy 2 that we're supposed to be praying as pastors, praying for all people, but especially for those who are in positions of authority. And I got thinking, if I'm commanded to pray for somebody, like I should pray for my daughter.
I really hope he does, because I need it.
Yeah. Or maybe we should pray for Moses. I should know something.
We probably should.
What does Moses need? What does Grace need? I should probably ask her, how are you doing? How can I pray for you? I should probably follow up on that. I need to point her to God's word in different ways. And so if I'm called to pray for those who are in positions of authority, I want to do more than just pray for them on Sunday morning from a distance. I don't know them, don't approach them at all. We live in a time where we can actually get to know them a little bit and develop a relationship that's founded in God's word, and lean in and care and do something that perhaps nobody else is doing. And that is not asking for anything in return, simply wanting to care for them through prayer and through the word. So I always want to do something like that. And then some friends of ours in another state said, hey, we want to show you something that we think is really shows a lot of promise. And they basically enacted this 1 Timothy 2, 1 through 4 kind of situation.
It was kind of the theme verse of the Church Ambassador Network, wouldn't you say?
For us here in Minnesota, that's one of the main passages. Romans 13 is another. 1 Peter 2 is another. But just really pressing in on that command. They were doing it already in this other state, and this is multiplied in other states, even beyond our own state now.
And do you know how many states we have it up and running in now?
There are 12 states that have a Church Ambassador Network.
Guys, that's amazing. 12 states with the Church Ambassador Network. Wow. Yeah. Sorry, continue, though.
Yeah, so that was a couple of years ago. I could see instantly that the model they had developed, there's proof of concept in it. And so we came back from that meeting and said, let's go after it. My church put me on a 6-month leave to concentrate rather than being part-time. Just put all my weight, all my time behind that for 6 months to get it up and off the ground. And in the middle of that, I was thinking, well, I'm going to go back to pastoring. And my church very graciously said, when that time comes, that 6-month period, we want you to either continue on with Minnesota Family Council or come back to us as a full-time pastor. But you can't do both well.
Right.
And you got to do one. And I thought, well, it'll be the church. Midway through the launch, all the pastor friends who were engaged with me at the Capitol were saying, Jeff, this is you. You're made for this. And it's really quite surprising to me, too, how God has done that and used that. So after 6 months, I stepped down as the head pastor. I'm still a pastor at my church. But stepped down and then engaged in this full time. So that's the background there. And it is thrilling, exciting. There are gears that I didn't realize that I had, that are being exercised just in simple obedience to God's word in this. And that's not to toot my horn. That's just to encourage everybody, wherever you're at, when God commands something and it seems really simple and plain, put some thought into it and engage in it. You'll find that you're made to do it. And there's so much joy that overflows in the midst of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So how many years have you been doing this full time?
Yeah, so started in 2019. Full time.
Wow, okay.
And here we are. 2021.
Yeah, that's great. I would love it if you just walked us through maybe what a day looks like, day at work for you. I know it varies. Sometimes you go to the Capitol, sometimes you're meeting with pastors or legislators. Maybe just walk us through what a typical day in the life of director of a Church Ambassador Network
Well, it's terribly thrilling. Everybody hold on.
He has to deal with me sometimes.
Deep breaths. It varies depending on the time of year, but let's say it's during legislative session, because that's the time that you're probably most interested.
Yeah.
I'll be at the Capitol during the legislative session. This year it begins January 31st, 2022, and will run towards almost the end of May. So I'll be there pretty much every day. The legislators are there, which is Monday through Thursday. They go home on Fridays generally, unless they're really cranking hard, pushing to get things done. And so those 4 days are golden for me. I'll get there in the morning, and pastors that we've met with, either who are already engaged in the program or new pastors, will join me at the Capitol.
And actually, let's just pause right there really fast. How can pastors get involved and do what you're doing? I think that's really important. Yeah.
So reach out to us. Grace mentioned the mfc.org website. You can also just go to mfc.org/churches. That'll take you right there. There's a form you can fill out, and we'll reach out to you. We travel the state. We reach out to pastors in your communities. We're very interested in what's going on in your ministry first, and we love what we're doing. We think it's worthwhile to share with you, but what really thrills us is to find out what God's doing in your midst. So there's no requirement that you do this for us reaching out. We are just thrilled to find out what God's doing throughout Minnesota, and it's pretty exciting. So reach out to us that way, and we'll schedule a meeting or a Zoom call or something like that. So back to the day. In the morning, it's usually there's a morning shift and an afternoon shift, a couple hours for each. Pastors will join me, and if it's first time pastor, we'll just walk the hallways. And at the state office buildings where the representatives from the House are located, the Senate office buildings where the Senate resides, there are 134 representatives, there are 67 senators, and we walk the hallways, and we have ad hoc meetings at times. We just bump into people, and pastors are amazed, like, wow, what just happened? They wanted to talk to us, and we didn't have to schedule a meeting. So there's that kind of meeting. There's also the scheduled meetings where we do reach out. We try to systematically get through the entire legislature. We've not met with every single elected official, but we've met with the majority of them, and regardless of Republican or Democrat. And
I think it's amazing, like breaking down those political barriers. That is phenomenal, and that is one of the biggest strong suits of the Church Ambassador Network, in my opinion.
It's been shocking. I don't know if it's more shocking to the elected officials or to us. So you can imagine, I think our audience here largely is going to lean conservative and so forth, kind of, how you'd vote, what issues are important to you. And those are important things, for sure, not downplaying it. But you would think that, okay, there's a certain group of people at the Capitol who are the untouchables, the ones that are going to cuss you out, be upset with you, throw you out of the office.
It's really a wrong way to think.
Yeah, they're somehow they won't respond well to you. And to that, I'd say out of the hundreds of meetings that we've had with Republicans and Democrats, we've never had a bad meeting. Never.
Wow.
Nobody's ever melted down.
Wow.
Which shocks me, because I'm waiting for it. Because we do disagree about really important things. And we're not hiding that, but we're not going there to first and foremost hammer them.
Right.
What we're doing, and I'll just read this to you. This is a way that we would often start with somebody. I'd open up God's Word and say, Representative so-and-so or Senator so-and-so, we're so thankful you took time today to meet with us. You've got a busy schedule.
Thank you for serving us. Thank you for serving our state.
And let me just, if I can read something to you that explains why we're doing this thing, because everybody thinks this is strange. Like, why would we be doing this? Let me read this here. And maybe it's just these two verses. Peter, who's an apostle, says in chapter 2 of his first letter, he says, live as people who are free, not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but living as servants of God. Honor everyone, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the emperor. And so, Representative, I'm called to live as somebody who's free. And the freedom there is freedom in Christ. First, freedom from our sin, freedom from our guilt and shame. But I think all other freedoms kind of come into orbit for me underneath that. And what I'm supposed to do with the freedom that I'm given to me is not use it as a cover-up for evil, because we can do that. Like some rights talk, like, this is my right, is really just like an excuse to paper over a really bad attitude or a thankless heart or selfishness or what have you. I'm not saying all rights talk. I mean, it's really important that we talk about our rights. But we want to do it not as a cover-up for evil, but and I'm talking to the representative again, or the senator, as a minister and as a Christian, I'm called to a really high standard here. I'm supposed to be using my freedom as a servant of God, living as a servant for him. And the thing that he wants me to do first is to show honor to everybody. It doesn't say honor if you agree with them.
And there's something really powerful about that too. When you show honor to someone, that's amazing. That really does break down the barriers. Even if you disagree on different issues, like if you disagree on the pro-life issue, if you're pro-abortion, or if the person you're talking to is pro-abortion and you're pro-life, if you're showing honor to them, that really makes a big difference. And I think you've seen that at the Capitol in amazing ways.
We've been shocked. And so as we show that honor, they're like, well, how are you going to honor me? And, well, we're going to honor you today by finding out how we can pray for you. There's another passage that talks about this, that we're called to pray for you. It doesn't say pray if we agree, pray if you vote the way that I want, if your voting record is sterling by my standards. It doesn't matter. In fact, it even says honor the emperor. There was one legislator who, not a Christian, and we don't betray confidence in our meetings. You'd never know who this is. But they said, during that time, the emperor is like a bad guy. And I say, yeah, that's right. And way worse than what we have, like, generally speaking, in politics nowadays. And even there, you're supposed to show honor. And so
it's hard because politicians really have a bad rep right now. It's known like if you're a politician, then you're a liar or you have to lie. It's kind of how politicians are viewed. But they're here to serve us. They are serving us, even though there are some pretty wicked politicians in office who have been in office. We're still called to show them honor because they've been elected to a position that God has given them.
That's right. And so when we do that, and you know this in marriage as well, for those of you who are married, if you want your husband to be more honorable, show him honor. You say, well, he's not as honorable. Well, he might be starved on that. You need to honor him, and honor flows. And likewise, husband, well, my wife's not so lovely. Well, you need to love her. You need to lay your life down for her. Love begets love. Honor begets honor. And that's not a competition where one person wins, the other person loses. Everybody wins in that kind of exchange of love and honor. And I think the same thing is very true for our elected officials. Part of the reason why we have such dishonor is because we're not paying the honor we need to. And honor doesn't mean agreement. Again, we can disagree about really important things, and we say that.
And don't compromise. You can hold your ground without compromising the truth and about what the Bible says, and you can still show them honor.
That's right.
That's very important.
Thoroughly biblical, not just cherry pick the verses we want. So, so meetings can be in person, scheduled. They can just happen. We can also call them off the floor when they're deliberating about things. Very common thing, and kind of work through. But they're very accessible. Pastors are surprised, and the fruit of it is just amazing. Again, I can't give you juicy details because it's in confidence, but it's not uncommon for lots of tears and lots of things that they can't talk about with anybody else. They come out, and the pastors are able to care for them from the Word, not with an agenda, not with, I'm going to go tattle on you and you're going to get some political points that I can use against you. No, we just, as ministers of the church, we're able to go care for the ministers in government, and it's a sweet, almost pure relationship. Like, minister to minister or shepherd to shepherd in the hearts of the people who are truly trying to serve. Again, you might not agree with the way they're doing everything, who are trying to serve. If you're a representative, it's like 40,000 people. If you're a senator, like 80,000. And I say, pastors, how many people do you have in your church? Oh, like 300. Great. Is it a heavy burden? Oh, yeah, man, 300 people I'm responsible for. And they don't always like what I do.
Yeah, 300 souls.
Yeah,
yep.
And they might disagree, and they might kind of kick and bite, and sometimes they're thankful, sometimes they're not. And I said, that sounds a lot like an elected official. People get upset. You got to lead. You got to make the hard decision. And so pastors and ministers or pastors and politicians have a lot in common when they're servant-hearted.
Yeah, that's a good point there. And I think you've touched on this a little bit so far, but I would love to hear more about what the response has been like from these legislators. I know you keep every meeting in confidence, so you can't say any names and you will not say specifics, but what are some of the responses you've seen?
Yeah, we've seen people that I mentioned earlier, the folks that many would say that's not the group that will ever interact with you. We've seen them be the most receptive to our interaction. Wow. People that just thinking about biblical terms like the lepers, right, or the Samaritans, or just different categories that we could put people in, the outcasts for say the constituents of Minnesota Family Council. Those people that you might imagine like, oh, they must be the most tricky. Those actually are the meetings that nothing against the other meetings are really good too, but those are the meetings that are most shocking to us. The softness of heart and the ability to actually talk about real things of substance. And what I think that does is it doesn't just create a safe environment to have reasonable conversation and inquire and know that somebody's not going to blow up at you, but it allows us to actually interact in a way that we can model something of this with other people. What happens if the model of the pastors interact with the legislators catches on so much that the legislature itself becomes even more respectable? And they are very respectable at times. A lot of people, you get this stuff on the news where like, oh, they're fighting. There are many times where it's a unanimous vote. They're working hard together. They're thankful for each other. But what happens if we have even more honor in our halls of government? That's a blessing to our state. Again, not compromise, but just honor.
And I think that's a great point right there, because if we can model this sort of showing honor and respect where honor and respect are due, just in our day-to-day lives, what my dad is doing is amazing at the Capitol. But what if, to my generation, showed the honor and respect that is owed to people that have places of authority in our lives? how would our culture change? And how could we work to change culture if we showed this sort of honor and respect that my dad is talking about? What if we showed that to our teachers? What if we showed that more to our pastors and to our parents? Especially in my generation, there's this whole movement and whole trend of not respecting your parents and just having this attitude that you're better than them or you know more than them. And well, your parents have lived probably at least 20 more years longer on this earth, oftentimes 30 more years, 35 more years more than you have. That's a lot more time and a lot more experience. And God has told us to honor them. That's one of his commandments to us. So I think what you're saying here really is pivotal in that when we show honor where honor is due, hearts and minds change, and we establish relationships with people. And that's really how we establish relationships, is by first showing them honor and respect. So really good stuff there. Really appreciate that. Maybe you could tell us about some of the surprising things you've learned along the way. What are some of the most surprising things?
You learn a lot about your own heart. How there's partiality in my own heart. There's some people that I'd rather spend time with and others that I wouldn't. And this forces me to go beyond my comfort zone, not for do-goodism, pat myself on the back, but to pursue people that I would otherwise write off or not engage. And it is shocking to me just how merciful the Lord is in that with people. I like to tell pastors that Jonah is so, he knows it's just like God to save a city, just like him to change hearts. And so he refuses to go to Nineveh. He goes the other direction, right? And then when God, gets after him, now he's back. And certainly we see that God saves Nineveh, and the king bows, and, the people are repentant and such. Jonah's still in a bad way, like, oh, I knew you'd do this. And this is in many ways, it's history, but it's also a cautionary tale to northern Israel. Like, who do you think you are? Like, I can show mercy even on Nineveh, who are the bad boys on the block. Nineveh's not a good place. You don't want to go there, and they're kind of a rival to northern Israel. And he says, I can show mercy on them. I showed mercy on you. Who are you to be stingy in thinking that I can show mercy to others? And it feels like today, in our highly politicized environment, where somebody's got to be an enemy and you got to toe up and you got to fight against them. You can't like anything about them and demonize. And both sides do it, right? Republicans and Democrats.
Absolutely. Both sides guilty of that.
Yeah. And that is not healthy. We need to have real disagreement. And sometimes there are sinister things, but you don't just demonize the image of God.
Right.
You see the image of God, you should stand up and clap like, wow, another one. God made another person. And it's just the most amazing thing. So, long way to say, it's renewed. It surprised me and renewing me and challenging me not to be showing partiality, to show kindness and care for everybody. And naturally, the way God's made me, I'm not a pushover kind of guy. If I work hard at being kind and gentle, so like if somebody wants tangle, I'm good for that.
Always there for the fight.
That's right. But I have to tone that way down.
Right.
And we're not contending. It's an amazing thing. So I'm surprised about my own heart. I'm surprised at how well pastors have taken this. It used to be, in trying to engage churches and anything in the public square, churches are really like, hey, I don't know. I don't want to do anything political that might ruin my witness. And which I understand.
Yeah, it's a good thing to talk about here on the podcast, though.
Yeah. And now, what's happening, pastors are running to us. They're like, this isn't ruining my witness. This is like helping my witness. I'm able to reach out in a nonpartisan kind of way, care for people. It doesn't matter. I'm not trying to force them to believe everything that I believe.
No.
I simply want to exercise what God's called me to do, exercise my religious liberties in a way that
bridge
is benefit for others. And then the pastors are shocked, like, I can do this.
Yeah.
I'm made for this. I said, I know. It's the same surprise that I've had. So that's been tremendous. And then one last thing, there are many, many things to talk about.
Yeah.
We're kind of on the cusp of this where as you develop relationships on both sides of the aisle, everybody, there are opportunities that come up where you start considering, like, where could the church, as an institution of mercy and kindness and love that God's established, where might it engage in such a way that the state right now is trying to engage, but the state's not good at loving people. That's not its design. Like, what happens when the state is doing its job and the church increasingly does its job, and those concerns overlap? Not where you're confusing the institutions, but you're simply saying, we want to see people flourish. And let's say people are in bondage to various addictions and such. Well, there's a role for the state, and there's a role for the church. What if we compare notes? What if we lean in on that? There are many, many different instances of mercy being needed in a very public kind of way. And right now, Christians have oftentimes just abdicated and removed themselves from any discussion of that. And the state has taken on those things, and you might complain about state overreach, but really we should complain about our own failure to engage. What happens if we start showing back up again?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what would happen if Christians started standing up for what they believed in and started showing the sort of honor that we're talking about?
Yeah, it changes local politics. It changes your interactions with. Yeah, there's so many consequences to this, and I don't want to give away the farm on that, but lots of partnership opportunities that we're facing, and we'll see how the Lord blesses that as we grow in our relationships and encouraging our elected officials.
Absolutely. And if any of you listening are interested in learning more on the relationship between church and state, we actually have a really great resource for you guys. If you go to mfc.org/unwoke, you will find our video library. We have many videos created for you, and a video series that is constantly evolving. We're constantly adding new videos to our video library. But we have a video on church and state and what that means for the Christian, how we should think about that. So definitely check that out. That one is hosted by our communications director, Moses Bratchard. So definitely check that out. But let's transition now to the rest of your team. You have a lot of pastors coming to you just to volunteer at the Capitol, which is awesome. And I think you have a huge reach with that. I don't know how many pastors you have volunteering on a regular basis, but you have quite a few. But we have a few more on staff here at MFC, and you uniquely chose each of them for their role. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Yeah,
that's right. We've been blessed here this last year to go a little bit of on a hiring spree. I have a project assistant. She's been with me for a while. Dee Dee Larson is her name, and she keeps the wheels on the bus turning, and she's just really wonderful that way. And then we have Pastor Joshua Foster that we hired last fall. Joshua is a lay pastor at Cities Church in St. Paul. His mother is Puerto Rican, and his dad's an Anglo guy, and just wonderful guy. We got on
he's
staff.
Awesome. And Cities Church, I actually attend there. Awesome church. Little plug right there.
When you're not
in
at
St. Paul.
your home church.
That's true. But Cities Church is a great church. We love Joshua. He does a lot for the Church Ambassador Network.
Yeah. So Joshua's been a great addition, and his focus especially, though he's not limited to this, his focus especially are urban churches. And so if you're in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, I encourage you to know he's a resource. He would love to meet with you, hear what the Lord's doing in your midst. And his special role, in addition to assisting the things that I'm doing at the Capitol, is really focusing on the city councils of Minneapolis and St. Paul. And so we're leaning in on that. And then we also
two others, right?
Yeah. So we have Daniel Rigney, who's not a pastor, but has done church ministry in the past. And Daniel is also at Cities Church, so it's like we went and raided Cities for some good folks. But Daniel is wonderful, and he is in charge of the greater state of Minnesota. So if you're outside the metro area, likely that Daniel will be calling you, emailing you, reaching out to you if you're a pastor watching this. If you're attend a church somewhere, just tell your pastor about Daniel. Tell them about Joshua. Tell them about our program. Tell them about the website. And then lastly, it's very part-time because he's still a full-time pastor, Rory Martin at Liberty Baptist Church in Eden Prairie. Rory's a dear friend, and he gives us one day a week, and he helps with the suburban. So we've got urban, we've got outstate or greater Minnesota, and then we've got the suburban ring. And all of us concentrate in the suburbia because that's they're more there than any one person can get after, and so we overlap with different areas too. But it's a fun team, and I'm really very, very thankful, very honored to serve with these men and this gal. Wonderful team.
Yeah, they're great. Love having all of them in the office. Great personalities, great impact too. So really thankful for each of them. What would you say is your favorite part of your job? I know there's a lot. I mean, it's probably...
admin. Admin's my absolute favorite.
Yeah, he's really good at the nitty-gritty, the mundane stuff. Like, he loves that.
Like most pastors, not so great on the admin. There are many things. First thing that came to mind is something I've already touched on a little bit, and that is just seeing what the Lord is doing in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Don't buy into the false narrative, right? Kind of the godless false narrative that somehow God has removed himself from the state. He doesn't care. He's not working here.
The clockwork God, kind of.
Yeah. He wound it up and let it go.
Yeah, that's not true at all.
we see on an almost daily basis, like, wow, this is happening here and it's happening there, and God's doing this, and these things are coming together in amazing ways. It's not to say that the days are bright and carefree and there are no issues. No, there are a lot of issues, but it's shocking to me just how faithful so many churches are, and how much they overlap with one another in kind of a seamless way without them even knowing it. They're not even coordinating. It's just God in his kindness is superintending and directing efforts behind the scenes. And it's exciting for me to be able to travel around, hear stories, and kind of piece together what God's doing, and then adjust our team so that we get on that page. Because our job is not to tell the churches what to do. It's our job to come along and resource churches, encourage them, bless them, give them opportunities, and enhance their ministry. And so that's a joy to me. Being a small church pastor for years, there's a loneliness that can be with that too. And so encouraging people and being encouraged by them, that's outstanding. And then, as I mentioned too, just being pushed evangelistically. Like I just love it. It's amazing. It's just amazing, the opportunity and how well it fits with the other pastors. So, yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. We're going to wrap up here with just a few last questions. We have one or two left. First of all, do you do speaking engagements? Where can people find you? Where can they reach you? How would you like them to reach out to you if they want to get involved in this?
Well, if they've listened this long, they've had enough, I know. But yeah, I do select speaking engagements as necessary. I love filling. I'm not saying I have to do this for you, but I love filling in for friends who are pastors when they need to take vacation or go away.
Yeah.
Love addressing churches and encouraging them, not in the slimy political way, but showing them there's a different option in engaging in the public square. You can let your light shine and not be corrupted by political forces out there, and you can actually do it in a way that you're rising above the rancor. So I love to encourage churches, pastors, in that, and also ministries too. So if there's any opportunity for me to bless and encourage, love to do that.
So where can they email you at?
Yeah, if they just go to the mfc.org/churches site, you'll be able to submit a form there. You can reach out that way, and one of us will get back to you. You can always just call the number there, the general number. There are lots of different ways to get in touch with us, but we are not inaccessible. So we're here for you. How can we bless you? How can we encourage you?
Yeah, that's awesome. And final question here. Where do you think the Lord is going to take this, the Church Ambassador Network, 3 to 5 years down the road? What's your vision? Where do you think God's going to take this?
I think we're going to have to be careful to make sure that we don't overpromise and underdeliver with various partnerships. But I'm not sure where exactly it's going to be. It could be in the realm of foster care in the state. There's a great need for the church to be more engaged in foster care. We'll never solve the foster care problem, but there's one ministry in particular, Together for Good, that I'd like you to go look at tfgood.org. So Together for Good.
tfgood.org.
Yep.
We'll have that on the screen for you.
Yeah, it gives churches an amazing view of how they can contribute in the smallest of ways or even greater ways in foster care.
Wow.
But I could see partnerships between churches and legislators coming along this way, because you need the state to punish evildoers. There's some parents who have really done horrible things, and as tragic as it is, they need to intervene with parents and children. But what happens is the church gets there first and is able to care for people who are, before they get to absolute crisis mode, get there before. Oftentimes the state knows who those people are, and then there just aren't people to lean in. Well, what if the church got there? There are lots of different things that flow out of interrupting that cycle of foster care. And so that's just one area. Addiction's another one that I was talking about.
Pro-life movement too, probably.
Yep, lots of different. It's just where does the Lord open doors, and where can the church speak and engage in perhaps even a different way than she has before, but still stay very faithful to the Scriptures, very centered in the gospel, staying on mission with whatever God has for you in your community. But there are lots of opportunities. Also care for law enforcement is one we're looking at.
That would be great, yeah.
Right now, law enforcement, they feel like they don't have a home anywhere. And so if you're a believer or a pastor, I'd encourage you to reach out to local law enforcement and just say, hey, we're thankful for you, we're praying for you. Show them honor.
Yeah.
Right? They need it. They're hungry for it. And the thing is, honorable law enforcement, they don't want crooked law enforcement. So the more you reward that, the more you bless that, the more you're going to get of that. that's another area too, law enforcement.
Yeah, and I think that just goes back to the point of, showing honor where honor is due. That is so important, and that's really lacking in our society. And when Christians can step in and do that and show that, people are going to look at Christians and say, there's something a little different about Christians. I want to learn more about that. I want to be a little bit more like that. And that's really where Christians are going to win in helping engaging with culture and changing culture and shaping culture for Christ. So I think that's a really good reminder. I think that was a very important part of this interview. And the Church Ambassador Network in general. So I just want to thank you for coming on the podcast this week. It was a joy to talk with you. I hope everyone learned a lot about the Church Ambassador Network. Again, if there are any questions at all, you can go onto our website. You can learn more there. We will link the Church Ambassador Network in the description below. And the Church Ambassador Network would love to be here to serve you in any way that they can. So don't hesitate to reach out. We thank you for being on the podcast this week. We will catch you next time here on the Family Beacon podcast. Thanks for listening to or watching this episode of the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you're up to date on life, family, and religious freedom. You can follow us on Instagram at MN Family Council and subscribe to us on YouTube to watch our content. Get the facts, stand for truth.